Hi guys, and welcome back to the Young Lawyer Podcast. For all of those newbies listening in, this podcast aims to bring the legal community together by highlighting the available support for young lawyers, discussing different journeys people take, and other important factors that could affect your legal journey. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the Young Lawyer Podcast.
Alrighty, well, welcome back to the next episode of the Young Lawyer Podcast. If you can just start by introducing yourself and how you began your legal journey.
Fantastic. Thanks, Damon. So I'm Nicole Davidson. I'm the principal and founder of Nicole Davidson Negotiation. I'm a former lawyer rather than a practicing lawyer. So I completed my articles at Minter Ellison back in the mid-90s. I'd done a law commerce degree and decided that I actually didn't want to be a lawyer. Well, maybe law decided it didn't want me. I may not have been too enthusiastic because I applied for 13 clerkships and 6 roles with accounting firms, and I got 6 roles offered to me with accounting firms and 0 interviews for clerkships. So I think maybe I didn't put too much effort in. But having got into an accounting firm in the insolvency practice, I decided to do articles rather than doing professional year. So I went to Minters and I worked there for a year and was admitted, but then left. So I've had a bit of a lengthy journey since then across a number of different things. So I've worked in investment banking, both here and in London. I've been a recruiter, recruiting corporate finance roles, recruiting legal roles. I've been went back to insolvency for a while and particularly worked on the ANSET administration, which was a fascinating job to be involved in, but then moved into the learning and development space. And after working as a learning and development manager for a couple of law firms, I then moved across into a training organisation where I was teaching the skills that I'd been organising for lawyers to learn, and eventually came into a role where I was teaching purely negotiation and conflict resolution topics, and all geared around theories out of Harvard Uni. I loved the material, loved the theories that were there, and thought these were things that were going to make a real difference to people. But while I enjoyed the teaching, I actually wanted to be doing what I was teaching as well. So that's what led me to where I am now, which is my practice, which is a mix of teaching negotiation and conflict resolution skills, coaching people on negotiations to help them get better outcomes, and mediating disputes to help people, help facilitate those disputes in a way that is better than the stress, cost and delays of going to court.
Yeah, that's quite a interesting journey, full of different stops along the way. I guess the biggest thing I'm intrigued about is, when did you know that the law, like being a lawyer, wasn't for you? Because the thing I really want to emphasize is that even if you've got a law degree, you don't necessarily have to be a lawyer. There's so many pathways that people can take nowadays. But I feel people get in this mindset of going, oh no, I've got a law degree, I've just got to go down this path, and that's the only one available to me.
Yeah, absolutely right, I think. And look, I guess for me, it was actually before I even started law that I knew that I didn't really want to be a lawyer. So for me, I did law because I got the marks. I'd set myself a goal at the end of year 11 that I wanted to get enough to get into commerce at Melbourne Uni. Sorry, I should have put that on silent. I'd got the marks to get into, I was aiming to get the marks to get into commerce at Melbourne Uni. I actually got sufficient to get into law as well. And I thought, you know what, why not? It's 2 extra years to do the double degree. I was never passionate about going into the law. I didn't actually enjoy my law degree particularly. There were some subjects that I liked, so I quite liked tax, I liked takeovers, but I found I was really excited about going into criminal law. And then when I got into it, I went, oh my God, it's so form over substance for so many things. To me, that's my biggest problem with the law, that there's so many instances where it feels like the rules are so strict that even if the outcome doesn't make sense, that's just the way the law works. Now, I get why it needs to be that way, because you've got to have certainty of law, but it just didn't make sense to me. So, yeah, long answer is, for me, it wasn't about necessarily deciding I wanted to be a lawyer and then changing my mind. But what I have seen, I think, and this is the challenge for people, is, once you get into the law, it was really hard to step away from that. And I remember the day I had to tell my parents that I'd quit my job at the law firm, and they were devastated. For them, I think being a lawyer was, a really important thing. And they couldn't understand why I wouldn't want to just stay there as a lawyer. But so it's a challenge.
I think that's something I've definitely noticed, is that it's a very niche career. You either enjoy it or you don't really.
Well, and the thing is too, I mean, what I've really loved about the legal profession is I love the caliber of people that are in the profession. I love working with smart people with sharp minds. And I think that's why, although I left practice, when I was investment banking and when I was in insolvency, I was very much working with lawyers on transactions on a regular basis. And then when I went back to learning and development, it was all with law firms. So, I've continued that involvement with the firms, and what I love now is I still get to work with lawyers, but I do it in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what kind of setbacks did you find along your way trying to find your passion for what you want to do?
I think the biggest challenge was that I just didn't quite know what I wanted to do. In some ways, I was willing to jump and try different things. And I think I've had a lot of luck along the way as well, in terms of being able to get the opportunities that I wanted. And, one of the challenges I think, and this comes across for a number of people, is that when you go into the law, particularly if you're in the bigger firms, you're actually doing fairly well financially, and that can become a real stumbling block for people. And I know when I wanted to leave insolvency and go back into, I decided I wanted to move into the learning and development space, having no experience in that, there was no way I was going to get anything above an entry-level role except in the law industry. And that's where I ended up, because for the law firms, the fact that I had been a lawyer, the fact that I understood the industry made up for the fact that I didn't actually have a lot of experience in the learning and development side.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the same boat almost with, your trial and error. Do you feel like that's a good approach to, finding your passion, really?
I think trial and error makes sense, but I think it's got to be done with a dash of strategy as well. And once again, I think I often wonder whether my journey, I have a great story. I can craft it into a great story now, and I do wonder whether that's luck or design. And I think coming into the negotiation and mediation side of things, all of the different skills that I've learned, because I've had that real focus on the sort of practical and the business and the legal skills, and then I've got the people skills, and they combine beautifully in mediation. If I'd wanted to go somewhere else, would it have been the same? I'm not quite sure, but I think every step of the way, it's about probably the only career mistake I made was when I was at Lehman Brothers in London, and I found myself working in an environment that was just not right for me. I'd come on, it was a very interesting situation. They brought me in as an analyst. No, they brought me in as an intern, because when I went for the interview, they said, well, you've got experience, but it's only Australian. It doesn't really count. So we'll put you in as an intern, which was probably about 2 levels below where I should have been coming in. And I went, but then I thought, it's Lehman Brothers. It's great experience. They're nice people. So I took the role and got myself into this. And then I discovered that all of the people that I was working with, a lot of them were very young, fresh graduates out of European business schools. Most of them had moved to London for the job. They didn't really have much going on outside of work. And I was there in London living the high life, traveling overseas every other weekend and wanting to do this. And I would leave the office at 8:00 and people would say to me, what, are you taking a half day? And it was just insane. Whereas they'd be leaving their jacket on the back of the chair, going out for dinner for 3 hours, coming back to the office and then going, oh, look, it's 10:00. I can get the car home from work. And I just didn't want to be a part of all of that. So I wasn't really happy. I went to the recruitment agency and said, you've got to find me another job. I want to get out of here and find me something interesting. And they came up, it's not something I'd thought about doing at all, but they said, how about coming and working for us? And it's interesting, it's probably in hindsight, the one job I took as a knee-jerk reaction and not really strategizing where it was going to take me, or was it a step in the right direction? And look, in hindsight, I did get some great skills out of working in that role, but it was a job that I took without really thinking it through. And I think it is important to really think, well, what am I doing? What is it that I didn't like about the role before that is going to be better here? And doing a little bit more due diligence than I did about what it actually might look like.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And I definitely think, young lawyers, I think I actually read an article the other day that, more young lawyers are actually worried about the culture fit. They don't want to turn up to work and just be miserable the whole day. So a lot of the top tier firms are actually, what I've read, they're slowly changing that whole atmosphere that, you need to spend till midnight every night there. You're not allowed to have a life. You've got billings to make.
Yeah, I think there's a huge shift in workplace culture that's gone on over, this was 20 years ago that I was at Lehman's. So there is a huge shift, and there's a huge generational expectation shift as well. So, definitely there are differences in the way things work, differences in the expectations. And I think even just the flexibility. Back in the days when I was doing these really long hours, it was all done in the office. And that has its limitations. At least if you've got the work to do now and you're able to do that from home, it can have slightly less impact because you can fit other things around it. But it is a very different place to what it was when I started my career, mainly for the better.
Just while we're on the topic of working from home, I guess, you're running your own business. How do you kind of separate your work life from your home life and kind of deal with that mental strain and, avoiding the whole burnout situation?
It's a really good question, and it is a big challenge because the work is always there. And when you're running your own small business, it never stops. So it's really quite a challenge. I've got 3 kids, so sometimes they'll keep me honest because they will drag me away, or I'll have to leave work to go and do that other part of the work. I have a husband who's a lawyer as well, so he's often working long hours at home as well. So generally it's okay. And what I try and do is take the flexibility of working for myself. So I might have time out during the day in the week where I can go and do things that I need to do, but then I might make up for it. And I've found, particularly in the last couple of years, I've found that making specific time for those things that I need to do to look after myself. So for me, it's making sure I go for walks regularly, making sure I have time to do some meditation, making sure I get to my Pilates class at least once a week. Making them non-negotiables has been important.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I love waking up. I do my breathing work for about half an hour in the mornings, and that just kind of sets my day. And if I don't really do that, then it's just not off to a good start.
Yeah, I know. I get to a point, and particularly just the last few weeks, actually, it's normally I do a short meditation in the morning, and then I do another one that's about 15 minutes before I go to bed at night. And I've been skipping them more often, and I'm like, oh, I'm starting to feel it. So it is one of those things that when you get into a habit, it's important just to keep it going, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be anything, a simple walk, like you said, reading a book. It's just about giving yourself that time and giving your brain that time away from overthinking about work or clients and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and when you're working at home as well, it's that difference between having a commute where you can sort of de-stress and reset yourself after the workday. Finding a solution, an alternative for that is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess as an employer, what guidance can you give to, young lawyers or employees out there looking for work in this kind of oversaturated market at the moment?
Yeah, well, I should say I'm not employing anyone at the moment. I'm going to get to there at some point. Although part of the reason I keep my business small is because, it's a lot of responsibility to have an employee. But I think that the key is, as you've said, in a saturated market, it's about finding that thing that you offer that makes you stand out. And I think one of the things that's lacking today is the personal touch. People rely so much on emails and generic processes for applying for roles. the more you can do things that build your personal connections and networks. A lot of jobs are going to come through networks rather than job ads or anything that's out there in public. And just being an interesting person who's interested in others and finding opportunities to have conversations about yourself and others is probably the number one thing you can do to help, because you will find people who take an interest in you. You'll find people who know other people and will take you under their wing and push you in the right direction of opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure the College of Law did something pretty good the other day about building your personal brand in there.
I think they had some excellent speakers on that session. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll have to find the link for it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it just takes that first step, messaging a lawyer, director, employer on LinkedIn, just going, hey, can I buy your coffee? Can I pick your brain? I'm just here to learn. I want to know how I can stand out, what I can do to be different. Because I've spoken to, other directors of law firms, as you said, emails just come through. They're just generic, dear whom it may concern. Like, you're just never going to get anywhere doing that sort of stuff.
Well, and I think you probably need to go a little step further than that too, because, they're all people with busy practices often. And so rather than just, I'd like to have a coffee, buy your coffee or something, I think you need to genuinely invest some time in them before you get there. So I would be going, hey, I read this article that you wrote about such and such. I think that's a really interesting idea. Would love to have a chat to you about that and get a sense of your thoughts around people like myself finding roles. I think it's got to be more, there's got to be something more than just a cold call. I want to have coffee and pick your brain. I think showing them that you've done something different, that you've made some effort, is going to be the differentiator, because I think people are starting to do those sorts of emails, and now you've got to differentiate yourself from, if I get 10 of those invitations a week, I don't actually have time for 10 coffees. So you've almost got to go a little step further now, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's becoming increasingly easier with LinkedIn. People are posting articles nearly every 10 minutes by the looks of it. So it does make it a bit easier in that sense. But at the same time, as you said, it still needs that personal touch.
Yeah. And that's why, you've got to warm up to it. You've got to, if you've got someone you're particular, and once again, it's the focus. Who do you want to meet? How do you go about meeting them? So if I've decided I want to meet a partner in a particular area of law, I might do some searches through LinkedIn and see, well, who's there? What are they posting? And I might even target the ones who are actually active on social media, start following them for a while, comment on what they've posted, show that I'm engaged, interested, and then I've got a reason to reach out. And they go, yeah, I've seen that name lots of times. That's assuming they do their own social media and not outsourcing it all, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with your whole reverse engineering process. What's the end goal? What are the steps in between that I need to get that? And I think as lawyers, we think laterally. We don't kind of reverse engineer so often. So it's something we definitely need to improve on. I know, myself included. But yeah, with social media, what preference would you put in or place on someone actually building their own personal brand using, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the possibilities that people in this generation have at their fingertips to put their content out there?
Look, I think once again, and this is general, it's whether you're a student or whether you're out there in the profession already, what is it that you're giving to people? Certainly my own personal view is that there is so much stuff out there. Unless you've got a reason for doing it, unless there's value in what you're putting out, think twice. But if you've got a perspective that's interesting, that needs to be shared, then that's what you want to focus on. Social media is about networking, but it's also about giving. And so the more you can actually focus on something that you care about and put it out there, and it doesn't need to be directly related to where you're headed or what you want to be doing, but it just shows that you are the sort of person who is really interested and engaged and makes an effort in what they're doing, to put that forward.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such great advice. And I think that's what a lot of people miss, with social media, the way it is. People are just constantly posting. they often forget that, the whole purpose is actually to provide value, especially, if you're trying to engage with clients and whatnot. What value are you actually giving that client? Why should they come to you instead of going to someone else?
Yeah, and that, that's the differentiator. And, it's one of the things I post a lot on social media, particularly LinkedIn. That's my platform of choice. And most of my posts are, here's some information, whether it's an article that I found that I've shared, whether it's something that I've written. I try to make sure that most of those are about something. And then occasionally I might just put something in that's a less subtle, I have services, please come and buy them.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess as we come towards the end of this interview, I've just got a few little quick questions before we wrap it up.
Oh, now I'm scared.
What is success to you?
That is a great question. Success to me is about doing something that I want to do and having the choice about how I do it. For me, the ability to choose is success. So I'm in control of my life.
That's such a great answer. And I guess what's a summary of the advice you'd give to students, young lawyers, or just anyone who may be listening?
Probably the number one thing I'd say is be curious. Really, when you get to talk to people, take the opportunity to ask questions, to learn as much as you can, and to build those relationships with people.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for jumping on. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you and hear about your story once again.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Damon. I look forward to hearing this and all of your other very good guests.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Young Lawyer Podcast. I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this podcast. The purpose of it is to close the gap between students and those already in the legal profession, as it is fairly daunting trying to make that transition. So if you found this useful, make sure you share it with your friends, family, or colleagues, so that way we can grow the young lawyer community. If you want to stay up to date, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and make sure you join us on the next episode.